I'll do a little. Oh shit! Spilled a little coffee on myself. Sorry about that. And I just did that as soon as we started live. So this is going to be an interesting show.
Right,
Uh,
right off the gate.
right off the gate. Okay. This is what I've been thinking with Marcus Cage. I am your host, and today we have a very, very, very special treat. We're gonna have my good friend and content creator, Mr. Israel Lucero. He is going to take over the show. He is going to host it. He's going to run it, and we're going to talk about a couple of topics which have came across both of our radars. And it's something that we say, you know what, we should just get together and talk about it together because we're kind of both going down those lanes. So I'll let Israel get into it and inform you guys, and then we'll start our discussion. How you doing, brother?
Hey, man, I'm doing really good. I do appreciate you having me on here and letting me kind of explore this idea because I know, a lot of people have been talking about these extremist groups like Antifa, race relations in America, white supremacy, Proud Boys, and all these other kind of extremist groups. And I've been planning out this segment, and kind of going with the title of like Antifa, Proud Boys, and Your Mom. And the reason that like I want to do it in that sense is because it's hard to kind of pin down why these groups, have become such a big part of the discussion online, as well as just kind of like have kind of penetrated the culture, right? In a sense. And there's reasons why it makes sense. And so I was kind of trying to figure out as I'm researching these groups, the history, their dealings with the Southern Poverty Law Center, which a lot of people have beef with, and just kind of trying to connect all these dots and figuring out like what there's not one cause that kind of can explain all of it, right? But I think the mom part of it is just the family unit, like a lot of these people who join these extremist groups, it's just like a lot of troubled people who have a lot of personal problems that they kind of externalize. And a lot of that has to do with their upbringing. Now, that's not to say that there are like suburban people who are doing fine, who are middle class, people who have that foundation they can rely on, that are part of these groups or that become, extremist thinking. That definitely is part of it. But I do think that it all ties back to society and the breakdown. So that's kind of like the idea in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely tie a lot of that, and for my audience who didn't see some of my previous discussions with Israel, he comes from a more a conservative point of view, but a conservative, more populist point of view. If I'm describing you fairly,
Yeah, I think that's fair.
and I feel that in some ways, the left, the populism on the left, and the populism on the right, there are areas where there are ties. If we're willing to, have the patience with each other and hear out each other's point of views and how we view things. Some things are going to be dead on. Some things we might not entirely agree on, but we do know that there's a tie there to some of these things that we are seeing. I do agree with Israel that it does go into some of it upbringing. Some of the protesters out there are being, respectful, are trying to do things right, and are even trying to stop other protesters from doing things out of line. But there are those who are out there who are meaning to cause problem, who are looking for issues where that they could take advantage of that, and that goes into what I believe Israel is saying. Um, home training sometimes. If you come from an environment where you're not used to structure and you're not giving rules and guidelines where to stick within, a lot of times you do wait for opportunities to cause havoc and mayhem. You know.
Yeah, it's like well, we can get into a little bit of the history, in Italy fighting like actual fascism with Mussolini
Hmm.
and where these kind of groups originated from. But it's one of the things that like to me makes no sense is trying to fit things from the past or from other countries into America. It's like the idea of socialism and states' rights. That's something I've been on lately. It's like there were socialists in America in the 30s who hopped on with the New Deal because they just weren't, they were seeing the extremism of trying to fit, a round peg in a square hole. I think that's the phrasing, but like, trying to take these things and not adapt them into America. America is so diverse. It's so different in its thought process, just from like white folks in the South to white folks in California and so on and so forth. You have, and you have to respect kind of that constitutional model. And I do think that a lot of these leftist groups, and even like some of the right-wing extremists, right? You got white supremacy, like this idea of like homogeny, and like the United States is always, meant to be a certain way and what have you. So it's just this fantasy and like this obsession that they get into, and then they find themselves with the age of the internet, and boom, you've got like, these troubled people whose voices are all of a sudden amplified and have a pathway into everyday people's lives. We see it online and everything like that, and then that kind of emboldens them, motivates them, and then it becomes physical. It becomes physical into reality. They start infiltrating groups that maybe started with a pure intent, like Black Lives Matter, and you'll see activists from Black Lives Matters out there trying to like get these people away from their groups, right? But it's this antagonizing thing. It's it's just they want to kind of have that come to fruition, right? Because at a certain point, it's one thing to talk about it online and then find people who mutually agree with you, and you start groups and all this, but then it becomes not enough. So it's really it's like an addiction, right? A person struggling with some kind of like mental thing where it's just not enough, right? I mean, look at like how addicts act, right? Boom, they find it, and then it's like virtual is enough, it's enough, but then it doesn't become enough, and then I have to go out and actually do it, right? That's part of it.
A mild pushback, I'd say, is I think more or less what I believe it is you have like when we were talking about that whole discipline thing. Along with discipline, a lot of times comes with education. And if you're not educated on certain things or understand certain ways to navigate things, like for instance, if you have a issue in your local area, you might decide, you know what, I have an alderman in my area, and I'm going to go and talk to the alderman, or I'm going to talk to the local city council and start trying to work there. Instead, you have people who, through no fault of their own or through fault of their own, find themselves in situations, and the pressure on it starts to get to a point where they feel something needs to be done. And if you put anybody at a form of desperation, whether it's through their own mistakes that get them into that situation, or say they're with they just weren't raised properly to have certain guidelines or ethics, or or weren't or dropped out of school at a certain age, or went to a school that just gave them a poor education. It's not giving them the proper tools to find other ways to navigate. And I think what's happening is you're having that frustration build. And then when we're watching the media and they're like, this is happening, that's happening, and that's happening, and when we have all of this going on at the same time, I think that pressure that it's just putting on people, it just has people reacting in a bunch of different ways. And some of them are, some of them are going out protesting in legitimate ways. Some of them are turning into just hate groups. Some of them are turning into just, I only care about this one single issue group. And there's no meshing of all these things to try to find, a more constructive, straightforward path, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that, the saddest part about it is that some of these extremes play into the liberal narrative. They'd rather have these separations of extremes because they can point to that and mobilize the other side, or point to this and mobilize the left side, mobilize the liberal side. It plays into their hands to have this happen. And to a certain extent, when you have problems like the racial tensions in America, it's expected to see that, right? There's going to be like extremist black activists. There's going to be extremist white activists, because it's such an encompassing societal issue that it's going to affect every corner of society.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have that. I'm not saying that, I'm not saying, oh, because we have these extremes, like it invalidates the concerns that
True.
exist.
Yeah,
But
that's
I do think that the
what.
media it plays it like a fiddle, because
Yeah,
it's a
sorry.
lot easier
That's what
to
I wanted to
yeah,
point out,
fearmonger.
so they would get that. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
I wanted to get that clarification, so the audience is getting that you're not delegitimizing the issues as a whole. It's that it's more the approach and the strategies and how people are manifesting towards getting to these goals. I mean, if I have you correct, that's how I understand your point of view.
Right, exactly. Look at the civil rights movement, right? A lot of the legislation that was crafted by the Republicans in the House. There was a lot of Republicans standing over the shoulders of Martin Luther King, who was standing over the shoulder of LBJ.
True.
LBJ lost a lot of his party because of that. A lot of the Democratic Party collapsed because of what he had to do, or he felt was necessary, because of the pressure people were putting on him, like these leaders. Um, and they understood that. They understood that it transcends like this political thing. It transcends that,
Mm-hmm.
Republican, Democrat, this and that. At the time, it was like a transcendent thing, and it didn't go far enough. But that's the thing about America that's like great and horrible, right? Is this? It's
Mm-hmm.
such a slow engine, but it's designed that way for a reason, because we don't want these extremes. Just like I wouldn't want to live under like an Antifa party majority, or what have you. Like, people talk about getting rid of the electoral college. You have everybody and their mother is going to start running. Well, what if the Antifa party wins with only 9% of the vote, because that ends up being the majority vote? How comfortable do you think people would be under that? You know what I'm saying? Like, if that was the case, we need people to go to every part of the country, because we need that average. People need to come around that average, and it's not going to satisfy everybody, especially these groups. But as Americans, we understand that it's kind of a love-hate thing. We kind of need it, but we also kind of don't like it. That kind of bureaucratic, like slow machine that takes a lot of time to turn in the direction that is the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I can understand, like you said, like people like get frustrated, and it's just like poverty, capitalism, all these things affecting the way people react to an issue or a situation, and you get them like joining Antifa, you get them joining Proud Boys, or something like that, not understanding that that's exactly by design what the establishment would love, is for you to join some extremist group that they can use their technocracy to shut you down, isolate you, and call you crazy through their media, propaganda outlets, and keep you as poor people divided. He's going to take your suburb property that you work your ass off for 30 years at some thankless job. So, you got to fly that, blue stripe, the thin blue stripe, because, um, they're on your side. That's the kind of narrative, right?
Yep.
And those are the enemy. Those people marching out there or whatever, that's the problem. And then you got the other side who's like, oh, I got to defend this, and I got to go to the extreme because they're going to the extreme. So matching extreme with extreme.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that leads nowhere. It really does. It doesn't lead anywhere. Nowhere productive.
Well, I mean, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you went down that line of that line of thinking in that thought pattern, and you laid it out that way, because that's something which I've been focusing on. How the elites try to divide, and even if the issue is something that is, it's something that most people will agree on, they will find a way to twist it. And what we don't realize is some of these things where we feel like, for instance, Antifa comes from, as we know, back in the World War II days, and actually fighting against the fascists. And that comes from something that's legitimate and real and genuine. We all support it.
Right.
Problem is, what they will do is they will say, oh, well, we see some people who believe that this is similar to fascism and this is fighting the fascism. And we see that movement starting to grow. Well, why don't we get our hooks into it and just spin it just a little bit? And then let's tell these other people over here, you need to worry about these people. And then that creates, the division, that creates the competition. And if they can always get you focusing on a specific issue, hardcore on a specific issue, then you're missing the ball on all of these other issues. Because, uh, a little bit off topic, but one of the big issues which I've been focusing on is what our government is doing as far as foreign policy, both parties. That's one of my big issues because domestically, most of that stuff's going to get hashed out between the House, between Senate. It's not going to be as much dealt with on the executive level. But what we do foreign policy, that is Pence, whether it's Biden or Kamala, that's going to be majority of their focus. And if we're focused on, oh, well, the Paris Accord and let's try to worry about getting, I mean, you get what I'm saying. If we're worried about all these different
Yeah.
issues, Green New Deal and all that, that's going to be something you need to be, if you're worried about Green New Deal, then you need to be jumping on Nancy Pelosi's back and Chuck Schumer. You don't need to be worried about which presidents. You got to stick at the people who are the lawmakers and what their job is. Their job is to put those things to action, or on the other side, stop them from happening. But we've focused so much on singular issues instead of deciding, okay, as a whole, what are the things that we agree on for the most part altogether? If I'm going to sit down and I can bring, say, a moderate, a liberal, a conservative, what do we need? We all need shelter, right? We all want clean water. We all want to be able to have some sense of health, safety. And I figure if we can get together at least like a template of what are the things we all need, that's not very much division on how we get there. And if we focus and harness on those things, then we can start dealing with some of these other issues. But as long as we focus it on the singular issue and all the bulk and just assume that we're all together on all this other stuff, we're always fighting on the margins. Just like I've always felt between Republicans and Democrats, how they use the whole pro-choice, pro-life debate. I've felt in my heart of hearts, even if you got majority of Republicans, I don't even think they would pass it, because the moment they passed it, that they wouldn't have that to use anymore to bring voters out. I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, what do you say, brother?
No, I agree with you, because then you gotta step outside those boundaries, and say, well, why do a lot of people, get these abortions? Why is it mostly in African American, Latino communities that these kind of facilities are most prominently used at? What's because of poverty? People are right.
Where they could also.
Right, exactly. I mean, if you were able to shift that dynamic, they wouldn't be concerned with that. It's because they're looking at it, the added stress, that how am I going to be responsible for this? How am I going to do this? I don't have the means, the resources. So you're right that they kind of isolated into this, like, oh, pro-life or pro-choice, and it's just like good versus evil, and they miss the part where, like, we're all human, and so depending on where are we at, our environment, our state of mind, that's what influences what decisions we're going to make. I could be in a terrible place. I'm out there drinking. I'm out there driving. I'm trying to numb whatever I can because I feel like I'm stuck. I'm a hamster on a wheel. I can't. And, that could be my job where I'm at. That could be what have you. And as soon as I detach myself from that, I breathe better. My mental state is better. Well, maybe I will go and move to, just up and move. What's stopping me from doing X, Y, and Z, and, really going forward and trying to get something done? So, a lot of it is that there was another thing that I wanted to mention that you had brought up, which is that, why this idea of, like, why can't I join the Republican Party? Why? So what? I'm progressive. I have progressive ideas. Why are you trying to tell me that, oh, Republicans aren't going to do anything? They're just going to oppress you. Okay, well, if you're Antifa, go join the police department. Understand what the oligarch and the establishment understands, right? They're playing the game, and you're over here trying to play soccer. They're playing football, and you're over here trying to play hockey. You know what I mean? You got to understand what they're doing. So the biggest fear for them is you getting involved in their business. You stepping up and saying, I want to be in the room. What you doing in this room? What's going on in here? Oh, you planning X, Y, and Z? See, they're comfortable with being in the shadows, not being seen. They're like cockroaches. They don't want the light on them. So what you got to be is that light, and you got to go and maybe I will join the fire department. You know what I'm saying? I got a clean record, but I have these beliefs in me, and maybe I'll make chief, and maybe I'll be the one that's pressuring these politicians, like, we've got too much on our plate, and you're making us enforce these drug laws, that, have no, that Wall Street is over there financing. They've got banks in Wall Street financing these things. They're putting that money in their banks, and they're doing those kind of things. And me as a police officer, or as a leader in the police department, I'm out here punishing my community, for things that you as politicians need to check the people who have the power and the influence that can perpetuate this. So, that, and I know it sounds kind of corny to say, oh, just run for office or what have you. But like I said, man, you have to be in that room, and you have to, confront it. So, this is something that the right does a lot with their agenda, right? Infiltrating the school systems,
They
infiltrating
infiltrate all across.
Yeah, right, exactly. So we have to just get rid of that dichotomy of like splitting ourselves, because progressives, conservatives, everybody does it, At the end of the day, politics isn't black and white. Politics is like an ocean of like different things, and it, it all depends on what you're talking about, right? Oh, you're just a conservative. What does that even mean to define that to me? Because I don't even know what that means. Conservative friends I have don't know what that means. To them that might mean, yeah, being a proud boy and everything like that. But they're blind. They're upholding, Republican status quo establishment things, and so is Antifa. They're just kind of playing this puppet role, where, like I said, you really want to inflict change. You don't like the way that the police systems run, join the police department, become part of the police department yourself. We talk about community policing, go ahead and do that. And that's how you change the culture, right? I mean, women in the infantry, right? Talking about military, they're joining that, they're breaking those barriers and saying, yeah, these are things that we can do, because now they're in the room. It's harder for me to talk shit about you if you're in the room.
That's true. I mean, brother, excellent points all the way around. It's something that I've been trying to preach to a lot of the people on the left, that I feel that they don't understand. I said, okay, you don't have to like anything Republicans do. You don't have to agree with anything. But here's one thing you need to understand. They play the game better than you. And the reason why they play the game better than you is because of strategy. It's not because of policy, it's strategy. They understand, if I'm in every place, I can know everything that's going on. I can anticipate it. I can fight against this. If I see that, oh, we're starting to have a political challenge over here, and they're starting to get money in their pocket and donations and all that, they get in there quick to try to stop that out, because they're paying attention. And they don't just say, we're not going to listen to this. Like, being former military, and you former military also, those experiences, I feel, help you see some things in different ways, which a lot of people don't. And if I wasn't in the military, I would have been drinking the same Kool-Aid as everybody who was defending Obama on everything. But because I was in the military and I knew what was going on in Afghanistan, and know what's still going on there, and some of these other countries, I have close friends who were special forces, who I could call up and they can tell me, hey man, this is some sketchy stuff going on. And so I have, when I hear about the, all the, I'm trying to think of what they have coming out of the opium, all the opium that comes out of Afghanistan, and the pharmaceutical companies, and the CEOs who are over there chopping up this little part for whatever, land deal or whatever that they want. And then the stuff that we have going on as far as the banking being bought up by Chinese investors and all these things. If you're not outside of the United States or even paying attention to these things, you're missing the main ball game, because they're trying to sell you on all this. Oh, it's about Republicans and Democrats, conservatives versus liberal. It's far more complex than that. And if you always stay penciled in these lanes, you're not going to get it. Because if you think about it, the Cold War, how did we supposedly beat the Russians? By spies, right? Our spies did what? They infiltrated into Russian society, pretending to be Russians, to defeat them. It's the same thing. I mean, anybody who has an issue against what Israel's saying here about going Republican and trying to flip the script on them is not paying attention to literally what has happened to the Democratic Party, at least over the past 30 years. I mean, Hillary Clinton was literally a Goldwater girl fighting against the Civil Rights Acts. She was against that stuff.
Right.
And on to Super Predator, and people don't think that there's any tie to a mentality there. She continued with a hard right wing
And that's why the Democratic
mentality.
Party right now is considered right wing by the progressive left wing.
Yeah,
How do you think that happened? It doesn't happen overnight. It happens with little girl, Hillary Clinton being like Goldwater girl, and then slowly saying, and this, and I'm not saying that it was malicious or conscious, but it happens where they it's like now she's a Democrat. Now she's basically the Democratic Party is molded after Hillary Clinton, who, like you said, was a Goldwater Republican.
It's the same thing with Elizabeth Warren. Why do you think Warren it feels perfectly fine to switch over to to a Democrat after being a Republican for like 20 years?
Exactly.
It's the same thing because the party moved over to them. Now, not in all ways. I'll admit socially it's very, very liberal. But on economics and on trying to actually make any change, they try to kind of say, let's stick to what the template is from basically the 80s and 90s, and we'll play around from that dichotomy. But we don't want to go too far to the right or the left at all. We want to stay right here in the middle.
Well, yeah, and I think that, that's a big failing because, you buy into this narrative that the right wing was able to turn the Democratic Party more conservative, more right-leaning on economics. But this idea or notion of Republicans ever changing, it's left it's left on the street like a useless thought. And that's sad. And that's sad because, we tend to want everybody to fall in line. Antifa says, lose all hope in the system. We have to tear it all down and we have to basically burn it all down, which is what they did, right? How does that help Black Lives Matter? How does that help? And how does that even fit with the narrative of the Black community? The Black community just wants to be able to be treated like everybody else and given opportunity, And right now, the only people doing that, Trump signed a $500 billion, and there's a lot of problems with Trump. So I'm not here to cheerlead.
Yeah. We're not going to beat you up on Trump today.
But all it took was, I think who was it? I know Kanye went up to see him. A couple people went up to see, and he listened. And it wasn't just these celebrities. There was a big coalition of African Americans who were there. There was an entire room that Trump had to go out and address and say, we're doing this plan. It's going to happen. It's called the Platinum Plan. I don't know what it's called, but that was accomplished because a coalition of people from community said, I don't care he's Republican. I don't care what letters in front of whatever. I know I've got a lot of people who are hurting and we need to do something. And something is better than nothing. And a lot of something, over time becomes a transcendent thing that people did together as a collective. That's how Black people were able to break the chains of slavery. That's how, we've gotten to the point where we've gotten in all kinds of things, in all kinds of ways. Hollywood was the most racist thing, out there in America back in the day. And maybe, in a lot of ways it kind of still is. So, but it's been chipped away slowly. And I don't know if you caught on Joe Rogan's podcast, but he talks about like a relay race.
Yeah.
So everything that
is making you a byword literally around the world by wanting to portray us in the most negative light. So I put that more on Hollywood than I do on politics or anything. Granted, we do have people in our communities that are not doing what they're supposed to. And there's reasons, and I believe that there's reasons for that also, which come from some of the turmoil which you do as a nation. If you do things to a whole community, there are going to be side effects. They're going to be, I'm not saying that should always keep you down and keep you from achieving, but it would be foolish to not acknowledge that it would leave a trauma on those communities. And you're going to see it in certain people who may not be as mentally strong or may not have had a foundation to help guide them around it or guide them over it.
And just to kind of make this more of a solid point from my end, look at how let's talk about white supremacy a little bit, right? A lot of these areas, especially way back in the day, I mean, there was barely one or two black persons in those counties. Those counties were run by majority white politicians, and some of them were the poorest counties ever. And what is
Mhm.
that poverty? What is that stress? What is that sense of there's an other out there who somehow, right? Somehow is affecting my life, because that's the narrative it's better for me as a politician who represents an all-white county to jump on that bandwagon of the Latinos, the black people, than to confront the problems of my county, the poverty, the fact that jobs are leaving, or that companies and CEOs don't want to come to the county. There's no money, it's drying up, the sheriff's corrupt, and all of this. And it's a way to keep those people null. It's a way to keep them, in control. And so they love it when they start militias. They love it when they start these groups, because all they have to do is pander to that now,
Yeah.
and go out there, maybe speak for a couple minutes, and say, come vote for me because I'm going to keep things the way they are. The way
Hmm.
they are is the entire county's white, and it's been white for 70 years, but we're still dealing with poverty. So this
Yep.
is what I try to articulate on the right, is to say, you have to come to grips with that.
Hmm.
You have to understand that.
There's a problem there, that it's not a racial thing. It's a policy thing going on there.
Right. Similarly, on the left, right, with like Antifa people and all of this, like in California and Los Angeles, they're outsourcing to private corporations. This is in the most liberal democratic areas. They're outsourcing to like child protective services. A lot of that gets outsourced to privatized companies. How
Hmm.
do you make a profit in those industries? This is happening in the backyards of the most like diverse groups and all of that, counties, so it's kind of like, but what they do is the same thing that these kind of white supremacy whistleblowing Republicans do, which is like, oh no, we've got it. We have all these, we have the biggest, child protective services in the country, and we need more money so we can do all this. But then in the shadows, when they're left alone, what happens? Children die,
Yep.
because of mismanagement, and because they just want to keep pushing that aside. That's not to say they don't do good work, but it's like these are the things. That's what matters, and that it's almost like we have like an inverted what is that pyramid called? Where it's like your concerns. It's inverted,
It's
right?
like an
Like,
inverted value system.
yes, an inverted value system, where we put the most mundane, non-significant issues first,
Hmm.
like the color of someone's skin, or their culture, above financial decisions that are being made blocks from your house, in
Hmm.
your local state house, that are literally harming and killing you. That have to
Yeah.
do with seniors. That have to do with your medication and who
Yeah.
provides it. That have to do with all of these. But that's not sexy. It's not pretty. It doesn't sell. Um,
Well, that's where I feel like we run into our problem the most, with trying to get forward on some of these things. Either we have one group of people where you got to give it to them as simple and as basic, and it's Trump, Biden, blue, red, yes, no. It's everything so simplistic, and they don't see how the rich history that goes into politics, goes into these different issues, goes into these different concerns, how they're tied to this, to that, to this person, and they're not looking at the whole entire picture. And then you have some, which I know they're well intentioned and well meaning, and I'm kind of pick on some of those lefties out there, some of them who I even enjoy. They spend too much time in the theoretical world on, well, if this happened and that happened and we could do this too, then we could do this and this would be great. Well, there's a whole lot of ifs you got to get to before you can even get to that. So let's try to get a little bit more practical and take all that lofty and brilliant thinking and bring it down to the actual issues that we can actually deal with or handle. And I feel like that's getting lost. I mean, I was speaking earlier about being more engaged on local issues, and like I'll give an example. Um, uh, After I got out of the military and I went back to my home state, state of Kansas, they had what they call a ghostwriter tax, And so the local gas company, what they would do is for all the people who did not pay, they automatically just added that as a tax onto everybody else's bill
Mm.
unfairly. And so we were able to get people together for a couple of city council meetings. You know, you get eyes in there, then they get a little bit nervous about doing that stuff. Just like you were saying, if you're in the room, they don't like to do that stuff in your face. They had to
Right.
keep postponing the meetings, and then eventually they decided we'll schedule one out at the state capitol at like 4 in the morning, and they hurry up, did a quick voice vote, you know, gabbled it, and get out of there because they wanted to get it done. But as long as we were in the room, they didn't feel comfortable enough to go forward because they knew even if they did a voice vote, we can see who it is.
Yep.
We can hold you accountable. We can vote you out. You
Right.
know, and that's the thing. Like I was telling people not too long ago, I was saying we're focused on, you know, the Secretary of State, but we're not thinking about what the Chief of Staff is doing. We're not worried about what the appropriations person is doing. We're not. We get focused on, oh well, the Speaker of the House, but you're not focusing on, you know, Senate subcommittee on intel. Those people are controlling, you know, our privacy, you know, Patriot Act, those kinds of things, and that should be a concern on both sides to at
Mhm.
least have our own privacy.
Well,
But
imagine if Edward Snowden had never joined the CIA. Think
oh
about
my
that.
goodness,
If Edward
yeah,
Snowden had never joined the CIA, would we have still had the information we had? He was in the room. His
mm-hmm,
soul, his heart was good. He came from a good family. He had good beliefs. You
yeah,
know, if you're on the left, go ahead, fine, accept him as one of yours. But think about that. If you do accept Snowden as somebody who's on your an ally of yours, thank God that he was a CIA agent, right?
yeah,
Yeah, because he was able to expose that because he was righteous and he knew what he had to do. And he was
mm-hmm,
somebody who said, I'm here in the room. I see what you do. And I need everybody in the country and around the world to see the evil that you're doing in the shadows. So, you know, it's not just about like, oh, progressives joining the Republican Party or what have you. It's more about just being present everywhere and
yes,
anywhere where there's power. So yeah, but
yeah,
yeah, give me
100%.
1 second. I mean, if you want
Okay,
to talk, I'll be right back.
yeah,
I'll be right
let's see.
back.
And a couple of things which he was saying is that these are the things which I've been talking about that we got to try to push for. If we're not getting ourselves in the room, just like he said, I mean, a perfect example. And I know I'll go into this story because I know Israel has definitely heard this one before and knows about it. But if you go back to Daniel Ellsberg, and for those who don't know who Daniel Ellsberg is, he's the one who released the Pentagon Papers, who was releasing information about the Vietnam War, that there was things, excuse me, things that are you know, that we need to know about. They even came out with a movie not too long ago. I believe it's Meryl Streep that stars in it, called The Post, and that movie is all about those secrets which he found while he was in the army, army intelligence. He leaked that information out to a senator. That senator being one of my favorite senators, Mike Gravel, who I was supporting in the presidential election before Bernie. But Mike Gravel was big on trying to do these disclosures, on getting this information out there. And it's the same thing. We have I can't remember his name, but it was another gentleman not too long ago. I believe it was in the '90s where he came out with a whole big, huge drop of things. And so we have that whole we have a history of people who have dropped this information, and you know, you like Israel was talking about. We have Snowden there. You have the information Chelsea Manning has released. You have people who are outside of it, but able to get close enough to their ears on the door, like an Assange, who was able to hear a bunch of things. And like I was saying before, back
Yeah.
to Daniel Ellsberg. I'm forgetting one. It's one person I'm forgetting because they tried him and all kind of stuff. He ended up getting out, and now he
Wait,
runs.
Chelsea Manning?
No. This gentleman was before Chelsea Manning.
Yeah. Was
Can't
it
remember.
like during the Vietnam War or whatever?
No, not Daniel Ellsberg, because I was talking about him a little bit, which he's the person who got me on to Mike Gravel, who I was a big supporter of.
Mm.
But this one was like right after that time. I want to say it was during Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and
Uh,
like he got tried under the Clinton administration and all kind of stuff. He ended up getting out from it, and he runs a platform now. I'm talking about some of the government secrets and things like that that go out, and the problem is we allow for the government, either party, to demonize these people so quickly, and we don't give them the due diligence and due justice to actually listen to what they're talking about. Because think about it, who in their right mind would want to go on TV, blasted to millions around the world and say, these people are doing bad stuff. These people who I know can throw me in prison for the rest of my life, can kill me, can do whatever they want to me. I care that much about whatever this is that I'm going to come out and spill the beans. You know it's not for money, because none of these people are writing book deals and doing all this other stuff or doing anything to protect themselves. They're just laying out the information. And for me, I've come to the mindset that I don't care where the information comes from. I don't care if it's a right winger. I don't care if it's a left winger. I don't care if it's a communist or whatever. If I can get this information and I can verify it and it's verifiable, the information is what it is. It does. The source doesn't matter, and that's what, like I was saying, with in the military, when I started seeing what was going on with a lot of the private contractors and defense contractors and stuff like that. When I started seeing those things, when I would hear Republicans who were always trashing Obama, and granted, a lot of it was the birther stuff, and it was easy. It's and this too. Any Republicans who are listener or consider yourself conservatives, make sure you weigh out your critiques fairly, because if you're doing all this racial stuff, when you do actually have a real critique, we're not going to listen to you at all. And because they pushed the birther stuff so hardcore, a lot of the stuff that Obama was doing, it 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 just did not get taken seriously, because they're like, man, you guys are already racist. We know you're racist. You're only coming after him for this. So now when you have something, you kind of did the boy that cried wolf thing. It's gonna fall on deaf ears. And a lot of things, like even though I was aware of things Obama was doing and critiquing him, there were still things that I wasn't even acknowledging because of that very aspect. That even gave somebody like a Hillary Clinton cover with Benghazi, because of how hardcore they went on every little thing. It could be like he put relish on a hot dog, and we don't do relish on hot dogs on this part of town. And it's like
right.
the tan suit. When you start doing to that point, it starts to just take all the sting off the attacks later on, and it helps them, because you could be waking us up and we could be coming together, right, left, middle, green, whatever, thirds. We could be coming together, but it's easy for people to get pushed aside, and little things like that can be enough to keep that wedge there. So, I mean, myself, I try to qualify my critiques without going into personal, spites. And
Yeah.
I think that as a whole, if we did that, we could start getting somewhere and be able to criticize issues that we have with Trump, or things that he might do, give him credit for when he does something great, or if Biden does something great, give him credit or critique him. It needs to be that nuance where no matter who you are, yes, we know you're not perfect, you're not going to get everything right, but we're going to hold you accountable, good, bad, ugly. That's the only way we improve, in my opinion.
No, I agree with that. And I just want to mention, I think it's Patrick Eddington that you were talking about when it comes to Desert Storm. Um,
Yes, yes, yes,
he
yes.
was, yeah, but yeah, you bring up a great point, and I think in America we've had a long history of partisanship,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously the two-party duopoly, and just that feeds into both sides. I think that the left now and today looks at, you know, the liberal wing of their party as their opposition, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them lose hope and say, well, you know, at this point, I got to look outwards to third parties or to, uh, you know, other things like that. That will never be successful unless the existing power structure is crumbled from within.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you know, you can give rise to things that are external from it, because it's weak enough. It's weak enough at that point to kind of fade out. You know, to kind of start slowly dissipating and giving way to something new.
Mm-hmm.
And so if people have problems with like AOC and the squad and people like that, then you have to also participate. You know, you have people from the Andrew Yang coalition who are doing something. You have people from, you know, Tulsi to a smaller degree. Um, and you have Bernie Sanders, you know, and his people. I know he's kind of fallen from the graces of the left, but
Mm-hmm.
this is something that in his philosophy he was trying to articulate. Even his slogan, right? Like "Not me, us."
Yeah.
It takes everybody to get involved and put eyes on target in order to be successful. I can't take something down if I don't understand it from within, from its core.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, why is my representative so corrupt? Why are these companies in my city? Why do they wield so much power? Oh, it's because of the funding that they've been giving him. It's because of X, Y, and Z factors, right? Or maybe the politician, a victim himself, feels that he needs to play this role, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just slowly kind of eroding that. And it takes a lot of time. And I think that's one of the things about America that frustrates everybody, is that everything just takes a lot of time. But, you know, we don't want things to happen. I mean, the Civil War happened in an instant. And, it was a bloody thing. So I think that, you know, things that happen like that, I don't want to say that like the Civil War shouldn't have happened, but you know, we shouldn't have gone to the point where we had to fight a bloody civil war like that. Um,
The thing about it is the Civil War, like going back on it and re-looking at it, and information which I didn't have before, because I looked at the Civil War just as a states' rights and slavery and all of those different things like that. I looked at it from just purely that lens. The lens which most of us never look at it from is, and I'm not going to go too deep into this. I will let people look into this on their own, because this gets into a dicey area. If you look into, like, for instance, Abraham Lincoln had a quote. He said, I have two enemies that I am worried about. The one in front of me, the Southern Army, and the bankers to my back. Even in that time, he was worried and focused on what are these bankers up to. Because what a lot of people don't realize is the bankers were the ones who funded the slave ships. These same bankers were the ones who were literally funding both sides of the war. One side's on the north, one side's on the south. And what they were doing is the north, they were charging them just a higher amount of interest rates and all that. Because it's like, we're going to make our money off of both sides, but we kind of want this side to lose. And so, and the thing about it is the north, you know, their major general that we had was Zachary Taylor, who was a drunk. And then you look at what the South had: Robert E. Lee, I get Stonewall Jackson. I mean, you can go through. If you look at these men's their pedigree throughout
yeah,
their
some of the best.
military line, these men were nothing to play with. These were efficient, smart, strategic generals, and how they all managed to lose versus Zachary Taylor basically, and Zachary Taylor, and I'm forgetting the other one. Crap. I can see his beard in my head right now. I can't remember his name.
Yeah,
Um, but anyway, uh,
yeah,
another thing that people don't realize is at a certain point,
yeah,
the South was close to stomping out the North and winning.
right.
But Russia actually got involved. I was like, what? Russia? Where did Russia come from in this? I didn't realize that Russia literally put a blockade, you know, on the northern fronts to protect them from southern raiders. So I'm like, it started making sense. I'm like, okay, now I get how he's able to fight all these other generals because he was having some help, which
Yeah.
were never talked about any external forces that got involved. We only talk about North versus South. We don't go into the funding. We don't go into any of that stuff. We don't, like, even after the Emancipation Proclamation, we don't go into the fact that Wells Fargo, Chase, Barclays, a lot of these major banks still to this day were the ones who paid reparations to the slave owners in slave plantations. It's like so much that, it's left out of the picture. And I mean, it goes into what we've been talking about, all this stuff. If you're not in the room and you're not trying to figure out what's going on, and you're only fighting at this one door, you don't realize there might be 3 or 4 other doors that you need to walk through also
Yeah.
to see that full picture. And
Well,
when
that's what I'm yeah, and I worry. I worry because, like, you brought up that whole banking situation. It was, well, back then the Democrats were more about like not getting big federal government things like that. Republicans were the ones who funded like big federal, like roads and bridges and big schools,
Yep.
public schools and stuff like that. And so there was goods and bads from both sides, and they weren't able to kind of articulate to each other a merging of the two, right? Like
Well,
maybe if the North, like the Republicans on the North end would have said, okay, we understand the weary kind of concern of like
mhm.
big banks, right? Who are kind of mostly in the North, mostly, like the Republicans because of all the big federal spending, because of all of this. Yeah, it's just like a what if thing, but like today, I think that it's a lot more nuanced than that. Back then, things were a
Yeah.
little bit clearer.
Well, yes and no. How I think it's kind of cut is like those Republicans who were taking the funding to build up things, I don't want to say they were wrong in trying to help build the nation up. And I feel like when you invest in something, you make it nice, it can bring money in. So I don't disagree with that. Um, but the problem is the actual ties to the money and what the interest rates and all those things like that were the bad deal. And that's what the Democrats were against at that time. They were like,
Yeah,
we don't want that because we know once we get tied in with them, we're screwed. They
yeah, you
basically
sacrifice something, you lose something.
exactly, and they didn't want to make that sacrifice. So they said, you know what, we'll go a little bit rough and slowly build ourselves, rather than take the quick money and build up. And if you go into even, though I despise
I'm
this
listening. Yeah,
former president, yeah, though I despise this former president, Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was probably one of the most racist presidents we've ever had of all time. But the one thing he did do good, and which I supported, was he did actually stop the Fed, the first Federal Reserve. He actually stopped that out, and he ran on "I killed the Fed." And after that, they attempted to kill him. Um, I'm not gonna say for a fact that it was the banks that tried to kill Andrew Jackson because I can't prove that out for certain. But those are the people he was beefing against, the banks. And then a couple of months after that, there's an assassination attempt on Andrew Jackson's life. The gunman, he pulls one gun, it doesn't fire, pulls the next one, it doesn't fire. And then when he tries to reach for a knife, by that time Jackson had pulled out his cane and start, putting the wood on that young man. And so like I say, I don't like Andrew Jackson as a person, but he was wise enough to know these banks they don't mean us good, and it's going to be negative. And if you go and you skip forward a little bit further to Woodrow Wilson, and you start looking up like what was going on with him, the blackmail that he was going throughout his whole entire presidency. I mean, he campaigned on no war, anti-war, and then boom, he flipped the switch, and a month later was wartime. It's a reason why he did that, and that it makes sense to a lot of us. Well, it didn't make sense to anybody at that time either. And me, even in college as a history major, I didn't know any of this stuff until I had to dig outside and find other sources. And when you start finding other sources, you find people who were senators who were around at that time who talk about it. You have judges who remember these things. And then you actually go to other historians and they go, oh yeah, I remember that. And it's like, well, why isn't this in our books? Why didn't you teach me
Yeah.
about this thing? And you start finding out anything that where it starts going into any kind of shady money ties and anything where the presidents can look in not a positive light, they try to hide it from us. Whereas I get it, they're trying to keep their image, pristine and all that. But what you're doing for us is if we're looking to them for guidance on how to do things, and we don't know these things that are going on, you're leading us into the same trap which they were in by not educating us what traps they fell into. I mean, what,
Right,
what do you?
exactly. But I also think the people allow this to happen.
Mhm.
It's unfortunately a I don't want to say a negative, but it's definitely a consequence of freedom, right? Is that I have the freedom to just not care. I don't
Yeah.
care what goes on in the halls of the city,
Mhm.
or I don't even care what happens at corporate. I don't, I
Yeah.
have that freedom to just do that, but it's definitely not. It's not good. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's what
So
happens a lot of times.
but it's a consequence.
It's a consequence of freedom,
Hmm.
but also you have to kind of as a free person, you also have to like consistently try and go and like put eyes on these situations that you feel like are necessary to have eyes on. um and you see that whenever that happens, good things come out of it, right? Progress happens. So you can't isolate people either. If I'm a progressive leftist who is borderline socialist or has like these big socialist ideas, what good does it do me to isolate Republicans, conservatives, and everything like that, and then not align myself with liberals, right? um you isolate yourself further away, and you
Hmm.
allow the extreme voices in that room to kind of flourish and uh uh be louder than you, right?
Hmm.
um which only drives it further away from like normal society, or from like being in the public eye, right? And then it allows the mainstream media to form a narrative about you,
Yeah.
um, that may be unflattering or may discredit you completely. Um, this is for everybody who hates Fox News and everything like that, or like Twitter, and things like Trump even said it in one of the interviews he did. He's like, well, thank God for like Twitter and stuff like that, because without it, I wouldn't have been able to win the election,
Hmm.
because I was able to put my voice in the room directly to the people. The
True.
people used to just get it from MSM. So if we lived in a world without social media, Trump would have been that ridiculed clown who never got anywhere. But he understood that power, that outlet, and what
Yep.
it could do for him, and say, wow, this is a way for me to shine the light and be able to tell people my narrative. Whether it's good or whether it's bad, that's irrelevant. It's the idea that he was able to, like a light went off in his head and say, yeah, this really helped me succeed. And it did. I mean, if you look at it from every vantage point, that's what got it for him.
And
Um,
I said the same thing with Bernie. If he would have done some of those things, if he would have went outside of the traditional means of communication, even if it was going to late night shows more often, and just don't get on there for 10 minutes. Tell them, hey man, I'll sit down for 30 minutes. Let's just chop it up. Let's talk about some things. He would
hmm,
have did that. He would have been able to give the people more of a say so on what he's thinking versus what the MSM wants to portray is what he's saying. So when you have everybody demonize him about, the Fidel Castro, comments, then he's able to sit there and actually lay out, this is why this is nothing wrong with this. Obama basically agreed with this. Mitt Romney. I mean, anybody with common sense can see the nuance here. Just because you can give credit to somebody who's doing bad things or horrendous things, it doesn't mean that every single thing they're doing is negative. I mean, I don't think there's literally anybody in the world that everything they're doing is negative. And I think that it's 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 a misnomer, and it's almost propaganda and manipulation when you try to make every single person an ultimate good or an ultimate evil. I
Yeah,
mean,
and when you're in those extremes and in that mindset, it's easy to dismiss everything. Well, the election system's rigged, so why even bother doing electoral politics? Well, guess what? You're almost prophesizing, or you're what is it? You're almost making it a reality by being in that mindset and trying
manifest.
to get everybody in that mindset.
Hmm. Yeah, you're manifesting.
Yeah, you're manifesting it because now those people they can operate in the shadows, and they don't got honest people there. So of course things are going to go unchecked. I mean, look at our criminal justice system and what happens in the prisons. Look at the police departments. Oh, I'm a leftist. All cops are bastards. A cab. Okay, I'm manifesting that because I'm not allowing like young leftists to say, you know what, maybe I will join my community, police department and try to be a good police officer and set these examples. Maybe I'll be the one that gets, the lashes and gets, run through the circuit as this like horrible example at first. But then
Hmm.
I'm putting that sacrifice, and it's a relay. It's a relay race. So maybe I got to be that first person who,
Go
gets the
through,
lashings. But
go
then,
through the door.
right, exactly. Then there's a door open now, and now it gets flooded. And this takes a lot of time. But like, yeah, that's
Yeah.
why I felt like, to me, um when I say like, I'm a Republican now,
Mhm.
that doesn't mean I accept every narrative that the establishment Republican Party sets out in its platform. I mean, you got people who are extremely to the right of me who don't fit that narrative, who don't all, mimic and believe everything that's on that platform. Um, but they value, say, like civil liberty, states' rights. Like you were talking about how Democrats are kind of liberal on social issues. I would
Mhm.
contend with that. I would have a little bit of disagreement because these are the people who want to silence my voice, who want to, thought police and thought crime and,
Well,
um,
I'm saying more as far as like the LGBTQ issues and
yeah,
more like safe spaces, and I don't even know. It gets on the socially left stuff. It gets. Yeah, I don't go there.
I think
No,
that you're right.
I'll lay it out for people so they can get where I am, and either they can. Honestly, I don't give a damn how they feel about it. I'll just put out how where I am. My religion, I don't even like to say religion because I hate religion. I hate organized religion. My faith leads first. Now, I don't believe in theocracy as far as in this government. I don't believe in that. When through my faith, however how it ends in the ends, then it'll be settled at that point. But it's not
Mhm.
for us to go in and try to pose my religious beliefs onto America or any other system to try to
Mhm.
change it
Right.
and to govern it that way. Now, there are going to be some issues. I consider myself on the left because economically I lean more that way. But when it gets to some of these social issues, I'm a default. There's no position here
Right.
because
But
um,
that's good because you're Marcus Cage. You're not the left.
exactly.
You're not a
Yeah.
monolith. Just like you're African American or you're black American, that doesn't make you don't speak for the black community. You speak
Nope.
for you. I don't
Mhm.
speak for Hispanics. So don't tell me, well, you're Hispanic. Why aren't you voting for Joe Biden? Because I'm not a monolith. And I believe in a republic. I believe that, the reason that Abraham or the reason that we had free states where slaves could run away to is
Mhm.
because the states had the right to determine and their own destinies and outline things that maybe Alabama wasn't ready for, or maybe Alabama didn't believe in at the time. People kind of just go gloss over that. It's like, oh yeah, people did run away to free states. They weren't
Mhm.
perfect, but it was a free state where a black American can take
Well,
refuge in.
it's easy to forget that we had a lot of negative stuff, but it's easy for you to forget about people like say a John Brown or a Sojourner Truth, or you had Geronimo, and you had other different people who were doing things that you might only know them in one way, but they helped other communities of people. I can't remember who exactly his name, but a couple of French soldiers and battalions who came over and helped some of the Native American tribes who were helping runaway slaves. The
Right.
Seminole tribe was big on helping a lot of runaway slaves, and in fact, a lot of the Seminoles actually were darker skinned natives. I mean, it all gets dicey if you start thinking, well, every Native American or indigenous person looks like what we imagine an indigenous person to look like now. Just like the same thing with the Middle East. Everybody imagines, oh, well, everybody in the Middle East is a certain olive skin tone. When you go back to the biblical days, every single person there, well, there was nobody there that was that complexion virtually.
Right.
So it's like, we have to look at all these things more nuanced. Like one thing which really frustrates me that we don't go in depth in, which I feel is almost insane, is we don't talk about Mexican repatriation at all, like in school, hardly ever. And that's literally how the United States got like a third of the country, by stealing a giant chunk of it, literally taking the people who live on that land, forcing them below a border, and now to today, some of those people are being told you can't come back to the place you used to own. I mean, I don't know. Everything gets so, there's so much nuance, and there's so many different ways you can dice up.
Well, that's why these extreme groups are extreme, is because they fail to accept that, and they fail to form their ideas into a strategic plan. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're so extremist that you're in the Communist Party or you're in the Fascist Party, that idea has to be formulated into a battle plan of how you're going to execute change that reflects your ideas. It doesn't matter who you are, that or what your belief system is. That is literally what you have to do. And it's easier to just say, well, I'm going to just dismantle the entire system, burn the police buildings down. I'm going to, the whole system has to come down crashing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But when you tear all of that down, you tear down the progress of your ancestors. You tear down the progress of this country's, sons and daughters who has gotten us to this point. There's a reason why people flee from other countries to come here to America. And that's not like dog whistling to right-wing Republican, talking points. That's literally the case. There are people waiting years to just become citizens. And, but that's because we're invading all these other countries. But no, you know what I mean? Like, there are countries who have autonomy. There are countries who have.
That's the thing. Even if you want to go from the most pessimistic take, America is still more opportunity and in better standings than you can in a lot of places in the world. So you can't. It's not fair if you're not at least acknowledging that, because you could be in the wrong province in the Congo. You could be in the wrong province in El Salvador. You could be in the wrong province in Mumbai. I mean, but at least here in the United States and out here in California, it's a lot of stuff that's a pain in the butt. But I believe that because there's so many people, there's so many businesses, if you look enough, you can find that opportunity and maybe that niche that could catapult you into that next stratosphere. Whereas maybe in, say, Boise, you might not have those opportunities, but we do have those.
That's a good point.
In the United States. It might be harder to get to them, but you got to always, at least, like that old saying, you shoot for the moon, and if you miss, you're still amongst the stars.
Well, look, even if, like you said, if you take the most pessimistic view, there is nobody who was in a more pessimistic state than the Native Americans in the 1800s. And still you had one chief who said, you know what, I'm going to hold Americans to it and go to the courts and be there, be the light that shines on the darkness, and be the first Native American to have his civil rights through the court system of the whites recognized. Why would he do that? Why would a Native American go through that trouble? If any people have the right to say, you know what, fuck the system, let's tear it all down. It's these Native Americans. But why were they, better person than me for
Mm-hmm.
doing something like that? Having to sit in a courtroom, be ridiculed in your garments and your culture and everything, and have respect for yourself and say, look, these are your words, live up to them, own up to them, I'm here to hold you accountable. That is literally civil, or what is it? That's activism. That's what I respect, that kind of like.
And then let's not forget, what is it, 4,000 treaties that they had that were broken, and
Right.
he still said, you know what, I'm still gonna try to do this within the system. Now I give him a lot of credit. I mean, if most of the indigenous people had my mentality, there wouldn't be any more indigenous people, because we would have fought till the last man and woman. Because I don't see how I could sit here. Well, granted, it's easy for me to say this and comfortably say this in this um in this time period or whatever, and people can think that well, you're just talking out of your ass. But I
Right.
honestly believe that, to know that my reality is going to be to watch these people who took my country and building up everything on it, and then spit in my face and live there and just accept it. I understand why there's alcoholism. I mean, you'd have to do something, because either I would have been trying to, go at them 100% and been wiped out in the process, or I would have to be under the influence to be able to walk through this existence, with what the trauma that you faced,
Right. Exactly. Um, but yeah, I mean, I wanted to kind of get back to what I was saying about like the family unit and how that kind of ties into
Mhm.
all of this. So, capitalism is that's another thing,
Yeah, well,
Um,
whole nother issue.
yeah, look, without getting too into like that discussion about capital, um, and this might make me sound misogynist, but I am even to the point where you got to question, like, yeah, why were corporations, why? So, the women entering the workforce, right? We see that as such a great thing, but there's some consequences that come with that too.
Mhm.
You had a diluted labor pool. Why would I give a man the job that I can give a woman for a little bit less? So you start getting into these like that uncomfortable conversations that society, you
Yeah.
know, has
Well,
problems with. But
you have the other
and it's like,
point of
what happened
view.
to the family when that, now the both parents have to work because the
Everyone,
labor wages got diluted to the point where the father figures in the 70s, black community, white community, every community said, we just can't make it. Prices are, you know what I mean? And
inflation.
now the woman has to go out there and work as well, and make her bread.
Mhm.
Leads to divorce rates increasing, leads to
Yep.
children, trying to find escapes. The drugs, that's when it became pernicious, is like during the 80s, the crack and all of this, and communities like that. Because these are children that are misguided, and it's like this misguidedness that leads to overt polarization, Bloods versus Crips, Latin Kings, da 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 da. What
Mhm.
group out there is going to accept me because I got two parents who are working all the time. I've got a school system that's crumbling because the PTA can't be no longer as strong as it was. PTA parents are out working. I got no time to go to no PTA meeting. I got no time to be involved in civics or like the city council meetings or what have you. I'm
Then
just
teen pregnancy and stuff too spikes
right.
up. Parents are not able to watch their kids nearly as much. I mean, all of those things tie in. Now, I could be off. I'm gonna go off into a little far field, but I'm gonna run this by you and see what you think.
All right.
I honestly feel like, because of all the change that was being pushed in the '60s, you had the whole civil rights era. You had the Black Power movement starting to rise up. You had what was that, Harvey Milk, and the whole gay and LGBTQ movement starting to move. Um, I'm having a hard time remembering her name. But a Mexican American activist out here in LA was starting to push for a whole lot of different civil rights for Mexican Americans who had recently migrated, and ones who had maybe just recently gotten their citizenship, or maybe second generation, or through visa system or green cards, and it was pushing for more inclusion, for more respect,
Right.
for better. And it was the same struggle that was going on with the civil rights era. It just was it was going on at the same time that, and because of the history with slavery, the focus got put more on the struggle that was going on in the black communities and that whole civil rights aspect, not focusing that you had the same struggle going on at the same time on the other side of the country for the most part. Because at that time, the Southwest was mostly where more Latino Americans came from, or I'll say Hispanic Americans, um, besides the more Caribbean or South American, who
Right.
tend to stay mostly on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Um, so you didn't have that, you couldn't really see what was going on there and those different changes. And but all of those changes, I believe that those powers that be at the top, they're being challenged. You know, Daniel Ellsberg with the whole what was going on in Vietnam. You had the stuff that was coming out about drugs being pumped into the country during Vietnam with the whole Frank Lucas and all that stuff was going on. You had the mobs which were running rampant. And I think that they had so much stuff going on, the protests out in the streets. They're like, you know what? How can we get these people got too much time on their hands? They obviously have it too good. They're out there complaining this. They're trying to change this. You know what? Fine, we'll give them the women's right thing, and we're going to start raising these wages. Well, drop the wages on them slowly by slowly, and inflate things. And
Yep.
then that's when we start having less of our people who were engaged in what was going on. That's when you started having more breakdowns within the family unit. That's when the crack cocaine and the drug war and stuff start going on that start wrecking a lot of the black and Latino households. It started taking the fathers out of the homes. It started putting more of the women to between the choice of, ooh, do I want to live really, really hard and struggle, or do I want to go to Planned Parenthood?
And yeah.
It started, and I think all of those things as a whole started to just like eat into our communities.
And not only
And
that, but influence where our culture goes, you know, the perversion of our culture, sex, drugs, violence, you know, that is what I care about here. I don't care about other things, right? Um, yeah, so and you're right about that, because you know, corporations at that point started working closely with government,
Mhm.
and you know, they said, well, you know what, you know, these people are asking for way too much. We're going to China, we're going over here, we're going over there, we're outsourcing these jobs, these labor unions, you're getting too much, you're asking for way too much at this point. And then hand in hand with the government, hey, you know, socialism's creeping up a little bit. Let's squash this. Let's villainize them. Let's use the privatized court company, CBS, NBC. Let's propagandize people and fearmonger all this away. And at the same time, like you said, inflation and you know, getting women out of the household to work. I'm not saying that women need to go back to the kitchen or anything. I'm saying
Yeah, we're not saying that women
one of
shouldn't
the
work.
parents needs to
Yeah.
be able to be at home with the children.
Well, what we're saying is it should be a choice. It shouldn't be both parents have to work because
Exactly. That's a good
it's
way to
too
put it.
expensive. I mean, you go back to, you know, when I was a kid, a lot of parents, black, white, also had, you know, at least they had their own home. They had vacation every, you know, maybe during the summer they go take the kids off somewhere, but that was like typical. Now, to parents are like a vacation, taking all the whole family on a vacation to
Yeah.
where? I mean, we can probably go down the street to like Dave and Buster's or something, maybe catch
Mhm.
a movie, but no, getting in the car and driving to the Grand Canyon and being there for 2 weeks and staying in hotels or having some kind of lodge. Like a lot in the Northeast used to own like a second home. I mean, the fact that middle class Americans, there's no middle class American who can own a second home.
No.
In
And you know
today.
what? It goes even further, because like you used to be like, it used to be like families getting together, like cousins, aunts, you know,
Big
second
giant family
cousins.
reunions.
Right. And so those people, you were able to lean on that family to be like,
Mhm.
to keep you away from certain things, right? Or oh man, Johnny's got a problem with drug. We gotta, intervene to this. When both parents are working, when everybody's has to work to survive, to eat, to put food in their mouth, that means that when Johnny grows up, he's got nobody. He's got nobody.
He's
So,
on his
yeah, what do you expect? Of course, these extremist groups are going to be predatory on that. They're going to take advantage of that. Groups on the internet are going to take advantage of that. You got nobody, but you got me. And we both hate black people, and we both can coalesce around the fact that blacks and Latinos are the big problem. And this is why, all of this has happened. And it's clean. It's easy. It makes sense to me. So
easy.
why not?
I mean, that's exactly right. You said it's easy, and that's if they can get. And that's the thing, which I want people to keep in mind. All of these things, there's truth in all of it. Whether you're talking about Antifa, whether you're talking about Proud Boys, whatever, there's truth in all of it. That's the reason why. That's the reason why it attracts people. But the thing is, they take that truth and they find a way to pervert it, and that's what you have to look for. That turn. Where do they turn, and what are they going to do with it? And that's where they get us. I mean, the same thing like when I was growing up. Most of the gangs were heavily recruited, and it's because most of us, being honest, just in my community, most of our fathers weren't around. So you look to older cats on the block. I was lucky to have uncles and grandparents and plenty of like coaches, plenty of strong male role models to kind of guide me in a righteous path instead of running around paying attention to all the other stuff.
Right.
But I grew up with people who had nothing, who had no kind of guidance, and I saw where it led them. And it's the same thing with some of those groups. Some of them might even be well intentioned, but if you don't have all the facts on what you're even going into, you're still just controlled opposition in a sense. And that's the one thing you don't want to be.
That's right. Yeah, because that is what these groups are. They're controlled opposition.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens everywhere, like you said. It's not just because even like with Hispanic communities, right? Like you got gangs, you got the cartels, easy money, right? Easy money, selling drugs, whatever. Just get in on it, and you got like a family, right? You got these people who are gonna look out for you when it's never the case.
Never.
Especially when it involves money, because that's all that these things are. It's just money.
Yeah, a lot of people didn't realize, like, growing up in Kansas City, what people don't know about Kansas City, a lot of them is Kansas City's a mob city. It has been, it still is, that has not changed. The reason why Kansas City didn't get the attention of Chicago, New York, LA do, Las Vegas, is because there's not a lot of the violence is tied to the mob. The reason why is because that was the bank. So for them shipping all their cash from New York, Jersey, Chicago out to LA and Las Vegas, that's where they housed a lot of the physical cash. So if they had a whole lot of stuff going on, it blows up the spot where the cash is. So they try to keep that stuff settled. But what they would do is a lot of the gangs which came out of the West Coast, that came out, the Crips, the Bloods, and then eventually the ones which came out of the East Coast, the Gangster Disciples, Folklords, and then eventually up to today where we have a lot of gangs which come out of Texas, like Sueño, Sutresa, Nortereño, MS-13, and you start putting all of them together. All of them get their drugs, their guns, vest, all that stuff, intel on what they're hitting and robbing, all from the mob. And so they're like, yeah, going ahead. We give these kids some guns and money, whatever. They give us a cut off of it, and we let them think that they're doing something. And then we let them take most of the hits getting locked up. And you're being separated from your families, continuing that whole process.
To a large scale, that's what happens. Like, and that's what I feel like. That's kind of what I feel like is it's a good explanation for these kind of extremist groups, because gangs and what we were talking about with like cartels and stuff, it's almost similar. It's very parallel.
Well, that's what they're doing between it's funny, we're almost getting towards the end, because I figure we won't kill everybody too much. If we'll run another one of these and sit down and
for sure.
because because I do definitely enjoy these conversations I have with Israel. Um, but I know some of you are not big for the super long. My mom gets on me all the time about going too long, but
Yeah.
but into these issues, it's the same thing when we're talking about with the gangs and how the mob sits like right above, kind of manipulating. It's the same thing which goes on in politics because these donors, which you have, whether it's a Sheldon Adelson, I can't remember whatever singer, and you can go back and forth, the Koch brothers to Melinda and Bill Gates, George Soros to whatever, football, because they don't care. They're going to jump on whichever one works out best for them, and most of the time they're funding both and hedging their bet anyway the whole time. And it's the same thing they're doing with politics. They're feeding into the problem because I forgot, yeah. It was crap. I forgot who was our buddy that who prompted us to get together. Brian, was it Brian
Right.
Aguilar? Um, and the Proud Boys. I mean, I remember back to Florida with the whole the Bush versus Gore thing. Proud Boys were completely the most astroturfed group I'd ever seen. I mean, these cats came out of nowhere on buses, all completely organized. They were straight up Koch brothers funded back then. Now, are they still Koch brothers funded? Did they pop up and just steal the name of the original Proud Boys? I kind of think that this might be a little bit different, but as in they did start off a little grassroots
They
and
did
might have
start a
gotten
little
co-opted
grassroots, but
and gotten co-opted, just like I feel the other one was grassroots from the beginning, and then it just served its purpose to just cause some havoc. And then these people say, you know what, we'll take that name and inspire what they did. And as they got going and built up, just like with Antifa, just like with the Black Lives Matter movement, is as it starts to build up, somebody comes in there and hijacks it. The same thing that which happened with the Tea Party, I felt like in
and it's
2010.
really easy with these extremist groups because you know, um, they're already coming into these extreme groups. I feel personally broken or just not in the right mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's really easy to prey on these groups
Or
because there's
especially when
somebody
you're
coming
not
in saying,
knowledgeable.
I'm going to legitimize you. So, what extremist group wouldn't take that opportunity left or right?
Well, yeah, especially when you're throwing funding at people who need funding. Now, that's a way where you can get. I feel like some of the right wing groups that have been AstroTurf have kind of been about money in the first place, so it was already easier to get a hold of them. And I feel like some of the people on the left, I think that they might say, you know what, we can help you out of that, what you're fighting for. I can help you. Now, I'm not going to help everybody, but I can help you if you play along. And I think some of them are selling out the causes. I mean, well, we hear about it all the time where you'll hear, well, this leftist group was all together and this one person did this. Now you hear about the little beefs. And we hear about it all the time on Twitter and Facebook and stuff. And I think that's just what's happening. Some of these
Well,
people
look
are
at the
selling
black,
out. Being
yeah.
called.
Like, would you say like BLM too has been susceptible to this?
Oh, completely. Completely. And the crazy thing for me is this movement has went on so long before it was actually even called BLM. It was always like we talked about before, what it started out as, how it's morphed into a whole bunch of other different issues all trying to be piled on. And the reason why is I feel the moment it became an LLC, I mean, you literally have, I know that, yeah, anybody's listening, they're going to jump on this one, but George Soros literally has one of the Black Lives Matter, like higher ups living in one of his, I guess he's rented a house for him or something, or
Right.
bought a house for him. You can't, I don't care how much you say you're for Black Lives Matter or whatever. The moment you do that, even if you say you're still doing it 100%, you've sold your credibility completely out.
Mhm.
You have no credibility, and so you're destroying the movement as a whole.
Yeah.
Because the once your credibility is gone, there's just nothing, in my opinion.
Yeah. And just to, wrap on this, I'll say this one thing about it is what was funny to me is that, like, the left has this weird fetishization
Mm-hmm.
of decentralization.
Yeah.
And I call it a fetishization because any successful leftist movement has always had leaders. Martin
Oh,
Luther King, Malcolm X. These were leaders. These were the heads of these kind of groups leading the way, and they stepped in front and filled that position. So there was more of an ability to rein it in, hold it accountable, guide it, guide the ship a little bit. In a decentralized movement, a George Soros, anybody can just come in and boom, my agenda here,
always.
my agenda there.
Always. Well,
Right.
yeah. I mean, that's a great point that you put that in. Anytime you have a decentralized movement, it can always be hijacked. And my thing also is, if you're a movement, you got to understand, if you don't have a leader to that movement speaking for that movement, and you're speaking to somebody outside that movement, who do they listen to? Who do they take? Who are they negotiating with? Are they negotiating with the whole 1,000 people who are part of the, and they're going to have to listen to every single concern? Or is there going to be somebody who's going to step up and speak? And that's what we do as nations. That's what we do as cities, like as you have
Yeah.
governors and mayors
Never
and
heard of a decentralized military being successful in combat.
it's impossible. I mean, it's a fallacy, and that's part of, like, I feel like the problem on the right is a lot of people on the right don't like to look at the whole totality of the system and see, even reflect on some of the negatives from their side. And then on the right, there's too many people that believe that they're going to be able to find this perfect utopia and everybody's going to love it once they create it. And it's like, that's not reality. Focus on what we need, and then later on worry about what you want.
Right.
Let's focus on needs, and then you can focus on what. Oh, one thing I was going to throw in there, when you, because the theme that you hit on about fathers not being in the homes, and anybody who's going to probably watch this and probably have some issues to say. I grew up in my county. It was Wyandotte County. I graduated in 1999. So yes, I'm a little bit older for some of you who didn't know my age. Um, my county in 1999, it's not a large per capita place, okay? Um, it still led the country per capita in teen pregnancy. Now, led the country in that, and it was also called the meth lab capital of the world for a couple of years. Now, when you have communities which are targeted, sometimes it's targeted, sometimes it's just how it all shook out. Regardless,
Mm-hmm.
when you have all these things going on, you're going to have all these consequences, and
Mm-hmm.
it's going to affect negatively. And if we're not trying to figure out, okay, how do we address this, how do we address that, then we're not getting anywhere. And that's the reason why I'm like always big on education, because if we know what they did before, then we cannot do that again, or not take
Oh,
that same.
absolutely. Yeah, you have to know your history.
Yeah,
You have
I
to
mean,
know your history, man. You know,
that's most important.
absolutely. I think that's one thing we definitely agree on for sure. You got to understand your history. You got to be knowledgeable. You got to understand how, you got to understand, okay, what do I need to do? I need to get lawyers. I need to get these people together because you need to
Mhm.
understand how it works, right? How the system works as well. But yeah, man, I do appreciate you letting me on. I know we're not going to solve the world's problems, but I think we can give people a little bit of extra nuance, something they may not have understood about, you know, um, these kind of extremist groups and how that happens, and what kind of things lead to it. I think we hit on a lot, and being there, I think that's the biggest
Yeah.
thing. You got to be there. Show up for the game. Show up for the game.
Sure. Oh yeah. That's what they say. It's like 75% of it is you got to be there. You
Be
got to
there.
be
That's it.
involved.
Like you
My
said, when you
boy,
was in that room, they were a little bit like,
my old partner when I used to work armor truck, he used to say all the time, 'cause he used to play lotto all the time,
mhm.
and I'd be like, man, quit wasting your time on that. He'd be like, hey man, you got to be in it to win it.
That's right. Yeah. Someone's gonna win
So,
it.
yeah, I mean, and he will win occasionally sometimes, but that's the point. It's kind of like a usury contract.
Mhm.
If you don't read through the contract, when you get screwed later on and the interest rates change and all that, that's kind of what we're facing. Most of these people are not learning what's all entailed in this contract and what's went on, And so now they keep running into these roadblocks.
That's right. And then you don't know what powers you actually have. Like you could have all these powers and not even know it, you know?
I mean, that's the thing. Well, and I'll go, with something that Socrates used to say. He was not against voting. What he's against is the way people vote. You got to understand voting is a skill, and you need to hone that skill. And part of honing that skill is to understand, what do I value? How do I prioritize it? Which person is going to be the best person to get me to that? Or is this person going to get me to that or not? Or are they just, nonsense? Because one of the comparison he used is the doctor versus the candy store owner. Yeah, all of us going to see those sweets and want the candy and want to go there for the good stuff. Man, we think about the doctor. Oh, he's gonna give us, thermometer in our mouth,
yeah,
shots. I don't really want to do that. But that's who you need. He's saying, we need to focus on that. It's kind of like if we got a voyage that we need to go on, a trek, you're gonna want mariners to operate the ship than to get a bunch of lawyers together. And that's all I'm saying. We need to, as a community, as a whole. That's the only thing we have. They have the money. They have control of the platforms. They can shut all of us down at any moment. I mean, I literally permanently stay shadow banned. So I already know I'm limited at what I.
Well, it's easy to shut down one person. It's harder to shut down an entire community.
That's my point. If we can all stay educated and get engaged and be able to know what the rules are, then we know then we can play back and forth with them. Because if we're playing a game where every time we take a couple of steps, then they come up with a new rule because we didn't know the whole rule book, we're always going to stay behind and you're never going to have any chance at actually getting anything of substance actually accomplished. I guess I will leave it on that note. You got anything that you wanted to inform the audience about that you have got going on? You want to plug real quick,
Yeah, so I try to do a show. It's usually daily or every other day. I put out a video on my YouTube channel, Big Talk Little Talk. Just type that into YouTube, you'll find me. I'm on Twitter at BTLT Show, so BTLT Show on Twitter. And then I've got other sites and stuff like that people can branch off to.
Sweet. Yeah, I'll make sure. I'll make sure that I'll put that in the chat. I'll come into the chat section when it goes onto my YouTube, because normally it takes maybe like 12 hours or so, and then it'll pop up on my page. And then I'll also share that on one of my Twitter outlets or whatever, and retweet it around so it can get out there and people could be able to see it, the ones who missed it. And for other people, if they want to feed in more topics, just like we had Brian, where we were both kind of thinking about some of these issues and we came together and answered the question for him. You all have other things which you'd like us to get into and hear our thoughts on it and our analysis. Hey, I know I'm game for it, and I'm pretty sure Israel definitely is. And and any of the other content creators which you've seen that we interact with, that we're familiar with and know, and we'll reach out to them and bring them on if you want to hear us all, chop it up together. So hey, we're all with it. We're all overall. Our goal is to have progress and actually get somewhere. And we're not always going to be 100% together, but as long as our goal is walking forward together, that's where I'm at, and that's what I support. So that's it. Oh yeah, I forgot. Let me plug myself. Tonight, make sure to catch me on Niall Elkham's channel for our show, The Political Matrix, that has myself, Niall Elkham, and Alyssa Vieira. And we go into all different types of topics. We really, really get into the weeds on some things, and sometimes we go into some funky cult classic movies and stuff. We talked about Teeth, the movie, and I guess they have a Teeth Part 2, where a woman has teeth below the, yeah, okay, you get what I'm saying. And then there's another one that we're gonna go into coming up soon, talking about Soylent Green. So if you guys don't know about that old cult classic movie, sci-fi movie, please check it out. We're gonna be talking about some of that stuff like that. And then I have a video that'll be coming on this page shortly to break down kind of what has been going on with me for the last. I know some of you noticed that I have not been broadcasting as much on this channel. I've been mostly on my other two platforms. And I've been just trying to put some things together. So I'm going to kind of lay out what my changes have been, and so you guys know where I'm coming from, and so some of my future content doesn't have you a little bit, thrown off, and you at least know that most of that content is going to be coming from. Note that my faith guides most of the way I see things. So I can talk about secular things, but know that that's always what's in the back of my mind. So I'm going to go deeper into that on that video, and then on the political matrix next Saturday night. I think we're gonna be going into prophecies, end time prophecies. So yeah, hopefully you all enjoy that. And Israel, if you want to drop in on the political matrix sometime and really get into some of those third rail, sometimes conspiracy theory topics, you're definitely welcome to come over.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I love riffing on whatever, man. It's always good time. Where those things lead. So I appreciate the invite, and yeah, I'll definitely hit you up for that.
Sweet. I'll definitely have you on there.
Right.
This has been the host of Big Talk, Little Talk, Israel Lucero, and I am Marcus Cage, or other known as Young Morpheus. For what I've been thinking, Israel Lucero edition takeover. Hope you all enjoyed it. Look forward to more conversations between us. I enjoy it. I'm pretty sure Israel enjoys it, and so I feel like we learn some things from each other. So and I think that is good content. So I'm going to keep it up, and hopefully y'all all join. And please, next time, come in, comment early, and we will try to address and answer those comments. Hopefully you all have a great weekend and enjoy your week. All right, take care.